welcome to a cover story conversation. Today, we are going to be taking a look at narcissism. Not just what the word means, but also that it is a clinical condition, it's a psychological condition which has got doctors worried about it, the state of mind, how it impacts relationships, what it means, and why are we so worried that we're actually having a conversation on this today. Joining me to help us explain this concept is Dr. Vipul Rastogi, senior consultant psychiatrist at Gurgaon in the NCR. We also have Dr. Vimal Kumar. She's a humanist existential psychiatrist. So welcome to this conversation, both of you. And Dr. Vimal, why are we so worried? First of all, what do you mean by narcissism in terms of psychiatry and psychology? And why should all of us be so worried as to have this conversation today?
Thank you, Priya, for having me here. Just to set the context, I'm a psychologist, not a psychiatrist.
Okay, my apologies. Okay.
Dr. Vipul Rastogi is a psychiatrist, so you have both of us here. Narcissism is, in the recent times, I've had an increase of people coming in with who are survivors of narcissistic abuse. However, narcissists don't come in for counseling, but they do
need it.
the pressure. But they are not consistent with therapy sessions after the first few when the pressure gets over. But you would have more context as I explain what narcissism is all about. Yeah. So when we say narcissist, so as a disclaimer, I would like to say that a narcissist is not an evil or a bad person. They are victims of various conditions that they have gone through in childhood, and they learn from that experience that power is the cure to dealing with feeling like a victim. And that is why they behave the way they do. The transaction they have with people is centered around control and power. And the belief is so deep that it's almost second skin. And so I'd like to give you a story of how the word narcissism came into existence. So the Romans and the ancient Greek mythology, there was a myth about a man named Narcissus who was obsessed with self. So the story tells us about a handsome man named Narcissus who goes around the world looking for love, rejecting a female called Echo. He sees his reflection soon after he leaves his court in the river. He falls in love with himself. Unable to bear to part with himself, he drowns in the river over a period of time. And a flower grows and blossoms in the spot where he drowned, which they called a narcissist. And that is how narcissism, the term narcissist was born.
Okay, let me get Dr. Vipul also into it. And how would you explain the term narcissism?
Look, I'll probably go a little bit to more basics about what personality really means. Right? So so personality is the way how we see ourselves and how we interact with the world. So there are certain ways that people generally respond. So that's considered normal. And people who do not fall into those normal categories, whatever they are, right? So they are they have an abnormal personality. Now, there are different kinds of personality or personality disorders, and one of them is narcissism or narcissistic personality. So essentially, these people are full of self-love. So they love themselves. They have a very high sense of, whether you say grandiosity, entitlement, and they want everybody to fall in line with them. If people do not fall in line with them, then they're upset, angry, agitated. Essentially, they're very unhappy people. So a lot of depression is seen in them. And narcissistic personality, in terms of a psychiatric disorder, is fairly common. So we say about 1 in 100 people will have narcissistic personality. Not all of them are diagnosed. So we say, look, there are some people who are covert narcissistic, some people are overt narcissistic. So covert is people who are very quiet, but they have these narcissistic traits. They'll keep on doing, one of the words last year was gaslighting. Words of the year was gaslighting. So something like that. And as Dr. Vimal was saying, a person's personality develops according to, the genetics they have, but also the environment that they grow up in. So that is what they see, that is what they learn, and that fuels their nature or personality. So something that, as clinicians, we really, really struggle to help people with. But as Dr. Vimal was saying, so we see more people with, who are victims of, their relatives being narcissistic, rather than the narcissistic people coming forward to say, look, hi, I've got
I
narcissism,
need help.
help me.
Fair enough. But Dr. Wimble, so I think the what keyword that is coming out is the need for control. That's hence it becomes a problem in relationships and a clinical condition. How does it manifest in relationships?
I love your
What are the red flags one should look for,
Yeah, I love your definition, Dr. Vipul, because I think, when you speak about personality, it's very integrated into, so personality is your personal reality, which is perceived by the various conditions you go through. And so the lens through which a narcissist sees the world is fairly critical. And depending on the covertness or the overtness or the vulnerability of a narcissist, or whether it's a disorder, that is the intensity of the behavior will vary according to that. So for how does it show up as red flags is they will make the person they are with seem in control, but they're the ones pulling the strings. They will, everything that the person does is not going to be right. Anything that they go through, including anger or, if they feel any kind of disappointment, it's the fault of the other person. There are various ways of isolating the person they are with. They don't want that person to be interacting with the world. So usually they are with an empath, because a narcissist will not tolerate a narcissist. So they're usually with a personality which is more empathetic. So the idea is that if the person's cut off from the world, then they get to control.
Okay. Anything you want to add, Dr. Vipul?
So, so narcissistic people are generally, very anxious people, right? So they have a very poor sense of self-esteem. So they want others to boost them up. And when people are not admiring them or do not give them compliments, for example, then they get really, really upset, right? So they want everybody else to fall in line for them. So the person they are with will probably also have low self-esteem because they would feel that they're never good enough for the other person. So you would see people who are in relationship with narcissistic people to also have a lot of anxiety issues, depression issues. Those things, those sorts of things will also come through. The narcissistic person will also have a higher likelihood of going through depression because they feel that nobody is with me or nobody is helping me or nobody is supporting me, because they would also have a little bit of, that a black and white sort of thinking. You are with me or you are not with me. There is no middle ground. And as we all know, the world is very gray. So they have a very black and white thinking, and that's why they struggle more.
And is this now, Dr. Vipul, is this more heightened now in today's world? Is social media playing a role? Because there's this whole sense of self and self-adulation that social media promotes.
Yeah, perhaps. So look, about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we would hardly talk about it. And, one of the major classifications did not have it as a main classification, psychiatric classification of disorders. But now it is. And the awareness is more. And both.
Let me come in. Does this come in as, even in terms of divorce, can you cite narcissism as one of the reasons for a breakdown? Is it a technical term or just a clinical term? What is the right word?
No. So there's a clinical term called narcissistic personality disorder. So it is a clinical diagnosis. Look, I guess it's very easy to fall in love with people with narcissism, right? Somebody who comes across as confident, caring to begin with, but but very, very in a short duration of time, the relationship seems to break down. So it's why not?
Dr. Vimal, do you want to comment on this? The question I asked him also about the social role of social media and the fact that, in terms of the clinical term, is it, how would you diagnose, how would you assess people?
Yes, it is. It is very much a clinical term, as Dr. Rastogi pointed out. And yes, it is one of the leading causes of divorces. Some of the divorces happening even after 30 years of marriage,
Wow.
because I think there is more. It's more seen today. It's more known today. So it's coming into the purview of a term, and also I think people are recognizing that there is no potential to change. And there is a lot of strategy in the relationship. It feels very different from a normal relationship, because normal relationships also have relationship issues, but this feels way more strategic, manipulative, and exhausting. And yes, to answer your, the social media, I think it is promoting it. It strokes a narcissist because social media gives us a false sense of control. And a narcissist thrives on control. They love the power. So they can choose to project themselves the way they want. And I think that that is what is heightening the sense of being the best, the perfect person on the planet.
So to take off what Dr. Vimal said, that the fact that, it's more choreographed than spontaneous, the relationship, if you're in a relationship with someone who has a narcissist disorder. Dr. Vipul.
I don't think it's that easy to say, but
strategic is the word she used, not choreographed. Yeah, sorry.
yeah. So look, they can also be very, spontaneous, but most of the times they're thinking about what is going to happen next, how they can manage the situation well. We can't forget the point that, they are very much, they themselves have a very shaky self-esteem. They want things to be perfect or correct or right. So, and the view that they have about themselves, what they can do, what their potential is massive, right? So they see themselves here, and anything under there is not acceptable. So, and look, if I have disappointment, I'll show it by maybe being quiet or speaking to a friend. The way they show their disappointment is with anger, rejection, lashing out, gaslighting. So they themselves are very insecure people, and look, it's hard for them also. I mean, look, we don't have much sympathy for people who they're narcissistic, they don't care, but they are very, very easily affected by changes that are happening, and when they feel they're out of control.
Okay. My other question, I think one of you said that sometimes people are stay in this relationship for 30 years, 40 years, and then they, Dr. Vimal, you said it. This brings me to another aspect, a spin-off, is the toxic relationships. Why do people tend to stay in toxic relationships? Gaslighting is a word that was used just now. So, Dr. Vimal, what makes people just stay in there? I mean, forget the financial situations, whatever, just the personality of a person who will stay in a toxic relationship.
Yeah. I think first is the sense of familiarity. Like the brain is wired, we are programmed to stay in familiar situations and relationships because over a period of time, I think we just learn to fix the brokenness rather than explore something new. So familiarity. There is a need to feel needed. And a narcissist feeds on that need of the other person because they need that person to make them feel very entitled and feel very good. There is I also think it's a sense of insecurity to let go because one of the leading fears that human beings have is the fear of being alone. So why break a relationship? And there are abandonment fears related to the fear of being alone. And then there is the over-reliance on others, like because I need somebody else to make me feel good. So even though I'm not feeling good, but there is someone there who's giving me a sense of negative existence, but at least there is a sense of existence.
The tale you told us, Dr. Vipul, where the narcissist abandons echo. I thought narcissist people would like echoes, echo chambers.
Echo, because they don't like their own reflection. They don't like someone else. So that's I think that's the detail, echo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dr. Vipul, your views on why people tend to stay in toxic relationships. Of course, we've heard some of the points, but if you want to add or
yeah, so one, as human beings, we don't like changes, right? We want things to, just continue as they are, because changes seem difficult, and you are in fear that maybe what comes next is actually worse than what you have now. So people are resistive to change. But and a lot of people, with narcissism, a lot of there's a gender disparity, so more males than females. And let's say if the females don't have better options, so occupation, financial stability, so they would stay back. And the third important point is hope. Hope that the other person will change, the hope the other person will become better or understand me better, and manage it, manage the relationship better. That keeps the people staying in a relationship which you can call as toxic relationship.
But do narcissist people, can they change? Because they don't come to you for therapy, Dr. Well, as you pointed out. It's the people who are abused who come. So what advice do you give?
Look, for every personality disorders, you say that, around the age of 40, 35, 40, things, tend to settle down. They're not as bad or, as explosive as they are. So, and essentially the treatment is, once you take them through a psychiatric or psychological evaluation, if it shows a narcissistic personality, you explain it to them as best as you can. And at some point, the penny drops. People understand because they're breaking all the relationships, so people are not sticking around with them. And sometimes they come forward for therapy. Now, what happens is when people are challenged, they don't like it. So they may come for therapy for 2 sessions, 3 sessions, but then they walk out, say it's not working for me. They may go and look for a different person, different therapist, but they don't tend to stick around for therapy, because therapy is the only treatment. Medicines is not a treatment for narcissistic personality disorder. So engaging in therapy is important, but they struggle to have somebody else in control, telling them, okay, you should try and do this, try and do that, because they don't like that.
Okay, I'm going to take a break and come back and continue this conversation on narcissism and toxic relationships, but after a short break.
जब मेरी 1 साल की बच्ची बीमार पड़ी, वो दिन मुझे आज भी याद है। मैं डॉक्टर के पास गया और उन्होंने बोला कि उसे 1 हफ्ते तक हॉस्पिटल में रखना पड़ेगा। और जब क्लेम की बात आई तो पॉलिसी बाजार के एग्जीक्यूटिव ने मेरी काफ़ी मदद की उस टाइम पे।
पॉलिसी बाजार पे 1 करोड़ का हेल्थ इंश्योरेंस सिर्फ 390 रुपए महीने से शुरू।
Hello and welcome back to a cover story conversation. We are discussing, well, the concept of narcissism, the impact it has on relationships, and above all, is there any cure? Why do people stay on a toxic relationship if there is a way out, all other things being equal? And the other point that was just mentioned by Dr. Vipul is that more men than women display the narcissist tendencies. So, Dr. Vimal, is this also, can we make a slight gender discrimination? Women are so-called weaker sex. Is that why there more men tend to get away with being narcissist?
I don't think it's got to do with weak or strong. I do feel, however, it's to do with the parenting styles. Because I think in our culture, we are, mothers kind of tell the boys that they can kind of chill and the girl does all the work. And so the behavioral programming in childhood coming from parents' environment, sometimes also religion, and other influences. I think that is what kind of gets it going. But then there are different experiences that a person will have outside of home and outside the parenting that would also fuel that. So that's one of the reasons.
Okay, so then what advice, and from your experience, because you've counseled a lot of people, when does enough become enough? What is that tipping point? First Dr. Vimal and then Dr. Vipul.
Different people have different thresholds, so it's very personal and individual as to when one is going to call enough. But some of the things that go on, see, a narcissistic abuse relationship is very overtly or very covertly abusive. So things like entitlement, gaslighting, baiting, breadcrumbing, hoovering.
What is breadcrumbing? I know gaslighting. I've not heard of breadcrumbing.
Breadcrumbing is like I I get decide, like if, for example, if you're ordering food at a restaurant, the order is going to be more about the narcissist, and the other person gets to decide later, and the lesser value stuff. But it's managed in a very strategic way, so it's very confusing. That's one of the reasons the relationship continues, because there's a lot of confusion. If the narcissist fears that the person will walk out, they'll usually attack with a lot of love bombing. There will be admiration, there will be chasing, and then there will be abandonment, and then there will be outbursts. And so it's very boundary evasive, like there are no boundaries. And it's hard for the person who's in it to even figure it out. And one of the things I'd just like to add here is we are only talking about partner relationships so far. But what if a sibling is narcissist? What if a parent is narcissist? Because the cases that I in my experience, the harder ones are the ones where the parent is a narcissist. Because you can walk out of a love relationship, a marriage, or, but even a sibling, you can kind of separate. What do you do with a parent? You can't divorce the parent.
Right. Good points. And what I can also see, sorry, you were saying something?
No.
Okay, there's also, I don't know, is there a thin line between a person being protective and a person being narcissist, Dr. Vipul?
I think so. Yeah. Right. So it's a very, very gray line. And, as when we talk about parenting, we talk about, caring and over-caring for a parent and a child, right? So caring is nice, over-caring is not nice. So in a similar way, narcissistic also are on that gray line where people who are in their relationship struggle to see which side it is going for them. Further to your question that you were asking, and in my clinical setting, what I normally see is, if somebody is married to a narcissistic man, and they'll keep on taking the abuse till the children grow up, and the children say, "Look, Mama, I'll support you. I've seen what has been happening in the family. We are there for you." So when they find enough support, they walk out. And as Dr. Vimal was saying, there's a different threshold for different people. But generally, this is what I see. So for people who are unmarried, breaking off a relationship is easy. But when they're married, it's slightly more difficult. But they tend to move out when the children are grown up, and they say, "Okay, look, let's stay separately. You stay with me, Mom. Let Dad stay separately, whether you take a formal divorce or not."
And do you see it happening the other way, Dr. Vipul? I mean, sometimes women are narcissists. Have you seen those cases also?
Yes, of course. So we do come across that, and look, the impact on the victim is almost similar. Right. So the victim feels, ashamed, not being able to help, depressed, anxious, low self-esteem. So it will reflect in a very similar manner. And the victims always want to care. As Dr. was saying, the victims are usually empaths. So they have a lot of empathy for the other person. But at some point, as I was saying, the penny drops and they say, "Okay, enough is enough. I can't take it anymore."
Okay, we've talked about relationships, but I want to explore the parent-child narcissist point more. So if any of you want to add more on that, because a child is conditioned to have the parent being the one in control. So at when does the child kind of realize that he's not just the parent is not being controlled, but the parent is also just controlling the way you live, and there's less independence? I don't know, Dr. Vipul, you want to come in first?
Again, very, very thin line, because in our society, in our culture, the parents, are, you're expected to accept everything that the parent is saying, right? And the parents know best. I think the realization comes when they are in their teenage years, where we feel, "Look, I can't express myself. I can't express my own personality as a child." And a lot of times those things are, if the child is rude or response back, then it is considered as a teenage tantrum. But the impact on the child is huge, because they grow up with a very poor self-esteem of themselves. So let's say they score 90% and it's not good enough. They score 95, that's not good enough. Why are you not the number one? Why? So because a narcissistic person will not accept 2, 3, 4. So the child grows up with very poor self-esteem and might have own behavioral issues as they grow up. But again, a very hard area to actually work with, because the parent will see no problem as such in themselves, so they would not change. but they might bring child for help, but it's very little to do, because when a child comes to you for treatment or therapy and you say, look, the problem is with the parent, then it is not acceptable, and people just walk out and they don't stay for the therapy.
Dr. Vimal, in your opening comments, you had said that a lot of what makes a person narcissist is also the conditioning, what they grew up with, the atmosphere, whatever. So if having a narcissist parent, I guess, would also low self-esteem would add to it. But what are the other red flags that one should look for in childhood that could eventually lead to you becoming, at least having these tendencies?
So first, to begin with, I would like to add to what Dr. Rastogi's just said is, a parent-child relationship is usually, it's a codependent, it's a safe, secure base for the child. At least the child's need is to meet that. And the parent would like to meet that. However, with a narcissist parent, nothing the child does is good enough. And so they're dealing with that part of the criticism, but also they also see the sibling and the other, if there is a sibling, and the other partner in the relationship, the other parent being treated critically. So and I think the first realization dawns on the child when the child moves out of school and goes to college, because that's when they start comparing their own parents to other people's parents, because they start talking about it. And I think that's when it starts to fall into place. Also, the relationship with the narcissist parent is that of enmeshment. It's very different from a normal parent relationship. And this I would like to explain, because enmeshment is about pretending confidentiality. With a narcissist parent, anything the child shares as information is used as ammunition by the parent against the child when required. So it is not just normal criticism, it's also this thing about, if, for example, a child comes home and tells the parent about something that happened in school at a vulnerable time, it's more than likely the parent's going to throw it back on the child to shame the child. Okay. The criticism is accompanied by shame. So, children who are born with an active narcissist parent usually have an existential depression, which they're very high performers. But deep down, there's a lot of sadness because they just feel that they shouldn't have existed at all.
Wow. Okay. On that note, thank you so much for coming and explaining this and sharing your thoughts with us. And it is something that I'm glad we red flagged, because there are a lot of things which we take as normal or personality traits, but things that, can have a deep, lasting, damaging effect and also impact your peace of mind. So thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.